Hello, and welcome to the Death with Deity podcast. I'm your host, Jason, and I'm sitting down again with my father-in-law, Steve. If this is your first time listening, Steve has been diagnosed with a terminal brain cancer, and the point of this podcast is to explore how the Christian deals with disability, the dying process, and loss in one's life. This is going to be part 2 of our Sanctification episode. If you haven't listened to the first episode of Sanctification, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to that. Just for a brief recap, though, to orient you, Steve shared last time that prior to his health decline and subsequent diagnosis with the brain cancer, he felt God leading him to various scriptures that were challenging him in his sanctification. He remembers praying for weeks leading up to it, that God would guide and strengthen him toward a more sanctified life. Particularly, he found that he was thinking more of others than himself, so it was a more selfless mental state that he was in, which in turn, of course, led to a more full prayer life. And today, Steve is going to discuss a couple of other points, some additional impacts that this cancer diagnosis and the treatment and just everything that's happened to him in the last few months, how that has changed his walk with God and his day-to-day life. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Jason. So I think the only other points that we were possibly going to address last time that we just didn't have time for was really an area that's changed is really being more humble. And I say that in all humility, because it's easy for us to say, I'm more humble, or I'm a humble person,
as a way of patting yourself on the back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And which I don't think of myself as being overtly humble, or prior to all of this, that I was the polar opposite of humility. It was just, things are different now for me, and it's forced a certain kind of humility on me that I would have never imagined. I don't think I could have imagined, but I don't know if I had alluded to this prior, but before my trip to the hospital and diagnosis with brain cancer, I'd never been in a hospital for anything. I hadn't had any health issues of any note. So even when I went in there at that point and was now getting the parade of doctors and nurses through asking me, like, so when was the last time you were in the hospital? What have you had done before? What other surgeries have you had? I was like, I've never been in the hospital. I've never had any, noticeable issues. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm in the hospital being cared for by just groups and groups of people. Having people, take your clothes off for you and get you dressed in new stuff, and, all those things that come with being in a hospital that I'd never experienced in my life. And so that's humbling. It's humbling for somebody who was used to being in charge of managing people, businesses, having a family, raising children, caring for my wife when she went through her bout with kidney cancer a few years back, mm-hmm. and my mother, who also suffered from cancer, and being her caregiver. So I was always the one who was taking care of other people, and now all of a sudden I am the one who needs to be taken care of, and to go from that one position to the other is very humbling. And it's not something that I could prepare myself for. Like, I wasn't given advance notice. Mm-hmm. And so there was a sense of like, okay, let's gear up to experience humility on a new level. It just happened. And so now I'm this person who's more dependent and needy, needing to be taken places, and sometimes needing just physical support as I'm walking on uneven terrain, things like that. But when I thought about that aspect of humility, I really thought about Paul, and how Paul went through a lot. He suffered numerous trials, but one of the ones that was the hardest for him when he was given that malady that he doesn't describe, but says that I sought the Lord and asked him to relieve me of this thing that was hindering me, that was keeping me down. Mm-hmm. And in 2 Corinthians 12:9, he says that God's response was, "My grace is sufficient for you." And I thought that's ultimately the height of being humbled, is that you're not going to get any relief from this, but my grace is good enough for you.
Right.
So
a true, a more forced dependence.
Exactly.
A complete flip of your circumstances in life to where you're, as we've talked about in the past, or you've shared, that you're not able to drive anymore because of the part of your brain that was taken out. I was just listening to this clip the other day, or earlier today, and you were talking about how because you can't even process all the stimuli, you can't safely drive anymore because your brain might not even register dangers such as a car coming up behind you or someone running out in the street or whatever. So, yeah, like you're saying, just a complete 180 overnight that you're forced to deal with and reckon with and adjust to.
Exactly. And it was a work that God was doing, and he wasn't asking me to be more humble.
Yeah.
He forced the humility on me.
Pushed the envelope a little bit on that one.
Yeah. And so anyways, that's been one of the impacts. And so I've had to learn to accept the help and to be more patient while I wait on others. And honestly, sometimes to do without, where in the past I might have said, hey, we don't have something here in the house. There's just a store down the street. I'm just going to run down to the store and pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
can't do that anymore.
I can't do that. There's nobody home right now. I don't have a car. So I guess I'll just do without. And that's okay.
It's got to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
without falling into despair. I think it would be very easy to fall into despair and anxiety, depression, and frustration, which are a lot of those. We've talked at length about each of those different stages in prior episodes too.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, some of it comes the Lord teaching me contentment,
mm-hmm.
being content with the fact that I'm not in the driver's seat anymore.
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's because I was talking with my wife about this yesterday, is that for our entire marriage, I was the one that drove everywhere. So I was always in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And she was fine with that. She liked to let me drive, and I like to drive. So I always wanted that sense of control. Mm-hmm. And not to say that she did never drive somewhere, maybe on a long trip or whatever. But now I'm just not in the driver's seat anymore, and I'm just being content with that and saying this is just the way it is, and it's okay. But the other thing that I think about in regards to this a little bit is just the idea of I've had a number of people commend me for my faith during this process. They've said, well, I'm so impressed on talking to you, just how you're handling this, and you're being so positive, and you're trusting in God, and relying on Him and leaning on Him. And I think when they do that, I know people are just trying to encourage me,
mm-hmm.
but I can't take credit for that faith because it was a gift,
Yeah.
And again, it's a work. Just like the humility is a work of God and something He's doing, any of faith that's being observed is really just something that He's doing. It's not me, so I can't take any credit for it. And I was just reading the other day, I think I was on Facebook, to be honest, and one of my friends there from church had posted a comment, was a quote, and there was no credit given to the quote. It wasn't being written by the person who was posting it. It was like, a kind of a picture image, but there was nobody credited for the
wasn't assigned anybody.
But it said this. He wait a minute. He light in us. Oh, I'm sorry. I really messed that up bad.
Once more from the top.
Yeah. This happens sometimes when you're missing part of your brain.
Yeah. That's all right.
The light in us is not our own. It is grace, Christ himself lit, burning quietly on the altar of mercy. And it just really stood out to me, the idea that light that shines in us, that people see sometimes, that it's all Christ, and he lit it, and we're just playing out or acting out that part of our calling, and so it's all mercy, it's all grace, and again, which is very humbling, because after years and years of pursuing leadership and training and teaching and giving to others, to be in a place where you're just utterly dependent, and I guess I've always known that I was dependent on God. I never would have denied that. It's just being played out in a much different way. And so the other thing that I realized had changed since my surgery and coming home from the hospital was just be more bold to share my faith with others. Not that, again, I never shared my faith before. It just became more of a focus. I thought, okay, so Lord, you gave me extra days. So what does that mean for me? Why did you give me extra days? Was it just so that I could enjoy a few more temporal moments? Or is it because you want to shine through in these days that you've given? So being more bold and sharing the gospel with others just became more of a priority, which is a horrible thing as a Christian to say in some respects.
Yes.
Because we
to our shame.
Yeah,
all of us are that way. I should say 99% of us are that way. There's the few radicals, zealots out there who will, in the first couple sentences meeting someone new, ask them if they know Jesus. But most of us don't start off conversations that way.
Yeah.
And maybe don't even get to that point with most of the people we know.
Yeah, and I would say that, like, I know when I was working in various lines of work where I was leading people, one of the I think the hindrances that comes that most people can probably relate to is that, well, in the workplace, talks of religion is really frowned upon.
Yeah. Don't talk about religion and politics at work.
Yeah. So you go, well, okay, I don't want to get in trouble here at work. It's not allowed. It's not allowed for anybody. And so I'll look for those opportunities when they present themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where I kind of always was. I was looking for those opportunities when they present themselves, but I'm not going to stand up during the lunch hour and
start preaching.
Yeah, open to John chapter, whatever. And so
since it's Thursday, I thought I'd read from chapter 19.
Yeah. So I think that's just something where your perspective's different. And I feel like now if God's given me extra time and he's worked in me in miraculous ways, miraculous meaning, I know if we go back and you listen to some of the earlier episodes, how he spared me to even make it to the hospital. Like I could have easily have just killed over dead. I was so sick.
Yes.
And yet he miraculously spared me. And so what do I do with that? Well, I sing his praises and I share his, merciful deeds to me with others so that people can see what a gracious and merciful God there is in the universe. And so I think that
I have one quick question, though.
yeah.
Maybe not quick. What would you say to someone listening who's not a believer and who, knowing that you're 57 with a terminal disease, you're describing this as a mercy? You're describing it as a gift that you even got 6 more months, a year, 5 years. Any of those, even the best prognosis for glioblastoma is still well below the quote-unquote average lifespan expectancy for a male in the Western world.
Correct.
So why would you say that this is some sort of gift or blessing rather than being taken early still?
Well, oddly enough, if we go back to, I think probably the last episode where I was talking about the fact that I'd been praying for God to work in my sanctification and to make me more like his son, right? More like Jesus, because that's the purpose for my existence, is to be more like Jesus, and I'm praying that, and then this happens to me, and what starts to happen? Well, I start to become more like Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it was an answer to prayer. Not the way I thought, but God often doesn't work that way. And I think last time you mentioned about Kevin, who said, don't pray for my patience because I don't want to have to learn it. And
he knew it would be uncomfortable.
Yeah, learning God's method of getting us to a certain place to be more loving, or to be more patient, or to be more kind, or whatever deficiency we might have, to get us there means he's going to push us into uncomfortable spaces where the only way we can really grow or get through them is to demonstrate that thing, that kindness, that patience, or whatever. And so then through the process, we learn that trait that we've been lacking.
Yeah.
And so on a certain level, if you want to say well, that sounds really ridiculous. Why would you want to go through something bad to get something good? Because again, as I'd pointed to those scriptures that were really challenging me, they were challenging me to strive to be more like Jesus. And I realized as a man in his late 50s that my time on earth was drawing to a close. I could live another 20 or 30 years, maybe even 40 years. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not that much time. And so as I'm approaching eternity, thinking, what's my purpose? My purpose is to not stay here forever, but to eventually cross over into eternity. How do I want to do that? How do I want my entrance into eternity to look like? And I want it to look like I'm more like Jesus than when I started down this path.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of not looking more like Jesus is unsettling.
Yeah. Especially going to meet him.
Exactly.
That's far more uncomfortable.
Having to give an account for the last, 35, 40 years of your life that you've known him, and say, well, how did the needle move in that time? Oh, it barely moved?
Yeah.
Oh.
What were you doing with the time I gave you?
Exactly. So I think for me, I see that as a blessing. So I know that I've been altered and changed because of what's happened, and that's a good thing. So my prayer now is just that I'll be given enough time, enough opportunity to do something with it. And if not, then if it's only another month or two, then, I want to have done everything I could with that little bit of time.
Yeah. Well, I guess another perspective we could take with it is that if we were living perfectly, if we lived as radically as Jesus did, we wouldn't live to old age. Jesus.
Yeah.
The world hates the light. Darkness hates the light, and it will try and extinguish it. So I guess if any of us were actually like Jesus, we would be quickly made an object of persecution and execution.
Yeah, I think about all of his disciples.
Yeah, none of them reached old. Well, maybe one, but virtually none of them reached old age.
But most of them didn't make it long past after he died and rose. It was just a short period of time.
The life expectancy for the truly radical.
Yeah, it was very short.
Yeah, sobering.
And I think that's true today, especially in certain parts of the world.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, certain parts of the world, much harder to live to old age if you're like Christ.
Yeah. So, yeah. I think one verse that really has stood out to me through all of this is Romans 5, verse 3, where it says, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And when I think about that, think about the idea that, suffering produces endurance, and then it's endurance that produces character, and character produces hope. It's kind of an interesting kind of progression that, again, by the world's standards, seems a little odd, but that's God's economy. That's how God works through each one of those levels and circumstances in our life.
It's woven into the fabric of how the world was created.
Exactly. So, as I shared at the beginning of this discussion, my prayer to God was, I want to be more like Jesus. I want to be changed. And ultimately that's what God is doing in me. It's what he's done through these circumstances. And so I can only be appreciative that he heard the prayer and he's answering it in the way that he feels is best and is the most impactful for his goals and his mission. I can easily say, well, there are probably a dozen different ways you could have done this without giving me a terminal disease. But, Scripture says that his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. So am I going to argue with that? I can, but
to what avail?
Yeah, that's the ant.
Can the clay say to the potter,
yeah,
why have you made me like this?
Yeah, exactly.
No, you can't.
I mean, you can, but I think that's where there's no hope in that.
Yeah.
So going back to Romans 5 there's no hope in that. But we know that as he's shaping that character through the endurance, the hope is coming through because we're seeing God at work in us, which is an answer to prayer, which does make us more like Jesus, so that the one thing that stands out to me in that is that when Jesus was faced with the cross, he said, you know what, this cup, it's pretty intense, and
I'd really rather not.
I would, if there be any other way, let this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And that was the love that the Son had for the Father, that he was willing to do whatever the Father required of him. And so now, being on this side of it, I understand, that if this is what the Father requires of me, this is how I'm going to be sanctified, this is how I'm going to be used by him, then okay. And that's a grace. That's a grace given. It's not something because I'm anybody special or because I'm, spent years developing sound theology.
Right.
It literally is just a grace given.
Like with any gifts of ours, any talents, anything we are given, anything from looks to musical talent to wisdom to being a great orator, it's all given. We can't really take any pride. It's foolish to take the pride because it's accepting something that wasn't yours.
Exactly.
Wasn't your creation, since we are a creation.
But we tend to do that a lot.
It's easy to do. Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason.
This has been Death with Deity. We appreciate you listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would greatly appreciate if you'd share it with others. You can also subscribe for email notifications on our Substack page. That's Hyper Premium is the publishing company, Hyper Premium on Substack, and it should prompt you to enter your email there. You can follow Hyper Premium on Facebook as well. We do have a Facebook page, and we are on a few other social media apps as well. If you'd like to email me, that's jason@hyperpremium.co. If you have any questions for Steve or I, or topics we haven't yet discussed that you would like to hear us talk about, please go ahead and send us an email there. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Have a great week.
I've traveled this big